Welcome to Taoist Secrets, The Great Awakening, a podcast by practicing disciples of Taoism at the Temple of Original Simplicity. This is episode 12, recorded by videoconference on June 27th, 2020. In this podcast, Grandmaster Alex Anatole and his senior disciples have a discussion on humility, which leads to self-preservation, and its opposite characteristic, pride, which leads to self-destruction. The discussion travels to various perspectives, coming to the conclusion that contentment is obtainable through humbly understanding one's limitations and the value of non-interference. It is humility that enables the man of Tao to accept, adapt, and embrace the chaos, suffering, and absurdity of the world around him.
So today we'll discuss actually the humility, which is a major concept in the Taoist teachings. Humility really goes through all aspects of Taoism, Taoist teachings, Taoist alchemy, and of course through all aspects of our life. You see, we can't touch anything without humility, and that's why very important to understand exactly what is the humility. First of all, what is humility? Terminology. And second of all, why we should pay so much attention to this concept. To understand humility, we still have to follow principles yin and yang, principles opposite. So we cannot really talk about humility without talking opposite phenomenon, which is a pride. Pride and humility, it's two sides of the coin, which absolutely should be discussed, both of them. And this aspect, I'll ask Master Percoca, tell us a little bit about actually this two aspects, humility and pride. Please.
Thank you, Grandmaster. As the Grandmaster said, we can't talk about humility without talking about its opposite. In order to understand a phenomenon as a whole, we need to look at both opposite aspects, so pride and humility. The problem with pride is it creates an overconfidence, a very lack of careful attitude. This carelessness that's a result of overconfidence and this obnoxious attitude can lead to disaster in your life. Many times, the things that we do over and over again that we're comfortable with, those are the things that all of a sudden something goes wrong. You can drive to the grocery store every single day, and it can be a mile from your house, but one day you get in some kind of horrid accident. So this overconfidence and this idea of carelessness is the character of pride. Conversely, humility is the idea that you're insecure in your knowledge and you're insecure in your abilities. So conversely, you're very, very careful. Even if I drive to the grocery store every day, I'm very, very careful as I go because you never know what can happen. In the great, profound words of Grandmaster Anatole, pride ultimately goes to self-destruction, and humility ultimately goes to self-preservation.
That's great. Thanks, Rick. So if we'll start from the beginning, what is the birth of pride? Let's talk about pride. Yeah, because it's a great phenomenon. It's like a lot of times in modern Western society, usually the basic person who go to a therapist or psychologist say, well, what I want, I don't really know what I want. So follow the man of Tao, say, okay, you don't know what you want, but you definitely should know what you don't want. Practically everybody knows what we don't want. And by understanding what we don't want, we understand what we want. That's very simple syllogism. So the idea of the pride is again what we humans think about ourselves. So are we basically kings of the universe? Are we in charge of our own fate? So a lot of our thoughts about that came from programming. We're all programmed. That's the whole thing. Program could be different. In a South Africa, in a Zululand, is a one program. In 100 years ago, in Mongolian tribes, was a different program. In ancient Greeks, they had different program. Then Etruscan people, Romans, they have different program. So now programmed was going through the religious institutions, through the temples, through the churches, actually through the priests, clergy. Now it's much easier to program us because unbelievable channel of communication, TV. TV is a great programming tool. If tomorrow in the middle of the summer on the TV, somebody say, well, be careful, tomorrow will be snowstorm, we'll believe it. That's it. We'll say, oh my God, let's get warm clothes. If somebody will tell us that in the TV that after tomorrow aliens will be basically landing in California, we'll believe it. No matter what, we are gullible because we train to believe to the mass communication. So it comes to the idea that we mortals, we are in charge. We're in charge of everything. So basically controllers, social controllers, putting on us idea that we're in charge. Of course, we have no limits. That's what they said, we're the most powerful creatures in the world. Yes, we're probably the most strongest predators in the world. But it really doesn't mean that we're in charge of everything and anything. So that's what about the programming. And the program always telling us that we can do almost anything we want. So now we come back to the nature. We're really not very strong. We're weak humans. Look at this. Now it's a pandemic. It's different diseases. We're mortals. And again, my favorite words, mortal unexpectedly. We don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. We still have all fears, no matter what. We still have accidents. So anyway, unexpected things happen all the time. So now come back to basic question. The supreme power give us one litmus paper, nature. Because we're so confused with different information, what's right, what's wrong, which religious institution authentic, which is not authentic. We don't really know. We can argue about that. Intellectuals, academicians, we can argue about that from morning to night. But still, we're not going to get the right answer. So the supreme power gave us actually one litmus paper. It's a nature. It's absolutely nature. So we humans in a nature. And now comes a very interesting question, which for my decades of teachings, I constantly actually ask somehow. Strange question, but that's what it is. Are we humans? Are we above the nature or are we part of the nature? So Peter, Mr. Blumenfeld, why did you answer us this question, please?
Oh, wow, wouldn't that be nice to be able to live your life above nature and not be subject to all its basic rules and regulations of the universe? The whole concept of Taoism is based on the rules of nature. And, mortal man's primary test is to have a clear vision of the reality and strive to understand his place in nature. To think that you live above nature is like comparing yourself to the gods. Of course, we must fight with humility every day to keep this kind of pride and ego in check. And once we understand that we're mortal and an integral part of the universe, then we can try and live every day in harmony with nature and value every precious moment that we have. So I guess my short answer is yes, absolutely. We are part of nature.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Thank you. So if we established that we're part of the nature, so we're basically subjugated to all the problems which in nature. Again, look at the nature. What is that? Is there equality in the woods, in the forest, in the jungle? Not really. There's no equality. Yeah, and it's still the forces, the cosmic forces, absolutely independently, actually pounding all creatures in the nature. So that's the biggest thing. If we understand that we are limited creature, that we're mortals, so then we're very cautious, careful. And then comes another important part. By understanding how limited our life, we're beginning to appreciate every moment, every second, every day of our life. Because we don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. It's we can get sick, we can get accident, million things can happen, and our short human life could be over. So the positive things of understanding that we're mortal unexpectedly, give us incredible power of joy today. Enjoy what we have right now, without desires of the mind, without really insane ideas that sky is the limit, that's never too late, and etc., etc. What's interesting that a social programmer, feeds our pride constantly. You have to be prideful. Prideful because you're human. Yeah, pride because you're super professional. Pride you have money. Pride that you have a great body or whatever. But the strange part of this, of the pride, that what we have, it's a temporary thing. That's going to everything. And it's interesting, pride is like a mercury. If you throw mercury on the floor, it just goes to every little hole. If person is poor, it's very prideful. I'm poor but honest. If person have bad luck, and say, well, that's not my fault again. Yeah, I'm proud of being great human being, just a bad luck. If opposite person get lucky and got some money, it beginning to think that I'm very special. I deserve it. That's what's interesting. So the pride is really goes to every aspect of our life. And we have to be incredibly careful with this. Especially it depends from how train people. Again, we come back to programming. And Master Perkoka said few actually interesting things. It's comparing with a program in a computer. Like computer programmed. Can computer reprogram itself? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah. Program in a computer can change only the programmer. So our program actually, it's almost impossible to change it ourselves. In ancient China, that's what was institution of teachers. Very respectful institution. When actually children from any caste was going there, sometimes for a while, for a long time, for a short time. And the teachers, that was their job, actually, to explain reality and explain programming. It's not fighting with the program, but explain how program works and is it useful for individual or not. So if we want to change the program or reprogram ourselves, it's very hard. It's like, again, come back to the computer. We need teacher, we need instructor, somebody who can point the finger and say, like, emperor's naked. You need someone who can point it and say it. So that's what basic ideas of the humility. Now, Mr. Lafarge, why don't you tell us a little bit about what great our teacher Lao Tzu wrote about actual humility, about the vulgar man, intelligent man?
Yes, sir. Lao Tzu had written one of his chapters, I'm reading from The Wisdom of Lao Tzu, page 128, The World and I, and this is the latter half of the poetry. The vulgar are knowing, luminous. I alone am dull, confused. The vulgar are clever, self-assured. I alone depressed, patient as the sea, adrift, seemingly aimless. And what Lao Tzu was discussing 2,000 years ago, over 2,000 years ago, was what we're seeing today, where the common man is very confident in his beliefs and his knowledge. He believes that he knows. He knows the way of the world, the way of the universe. He knows when life begins and when life ends. He knows what happens before and after. They're very confident in their knowledge, but in reality, we as human beings, human animals, we are incredibly limited. We're incredibly limited in our knowledge, in our abilities, and we're lucky to just be hanging on to this earth at this point in life, and yet we're willing to discuss and teach other people what we think, as the great philosophers that we are, how things truly are. They have this great smugness in clinging to their beliefs in spite of what their eyes may portray to them. He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know. And the common man, he knows, he speaks, and he's very proud of this. He's full of great hubris. The Tao man is very humble, and using camouflage, he disguises what his true thoughts are, and he tries to blend in with the common herd so that we won't be attacked by them.
Thank you, Pete. Thanks. Actually, talking about disguise like a nature. Look at the color of the nature, even like a tiger, even lion. Even they camouflage. These most powerful creatures in the world, they camouflage themselves. So it's a natural humility. As a matter of fact, there's this little animal, chameleon, which has a bad connotation in our actually human language. It's actually, Mr. Wright, tell us a little bit about camouflage and chameleon. What do you think about that? Your thoughts, please.
Chameleon is well known for just being able to change its color to blend in with whatever background it's against. And we, as trying to be good Tao people, we say, all right, I am in the midst of not a color background so much, but I'm in the midst of a society. And the society has rules, has a lot of rules, and it is not very flexible about those rules. And it is very suspicious of anyone who doesn't behave the way it expects. So as a Tao person who's very interested in self-preservation, I would like to be both an observer of those rules and to be able to copy them. But the distinction we make is that I know that I'm copying them. I don't necessarily, in fact, I probably don't believe them, because those beliefs are almost certainly going to run counter to my own self-interest. They will be very beneficial to the society as a whole, and particularly to the small group at the top of the pyramid of that society. For me, no. But if I simply say that out loud and say, I'm not going to follow your rules are bad for me, I'll be ostracized. I may even be attacked. I might be jailed. So it's very dangerous for me to proclaim my confident knowledge. And as we've been saying, being too confident in your knowledge is already a bad idea. So we are chameleons amongst societal rules, not because we think we're better than society, not because we think we're better than everyone else, but because we recognize that the rules that we are being given are not for our benefit. And if we're going to try to understand that and live for our own benefit, we're going to have to blend in to avoid being attacked, and then try to find our own way within those limitations.
That's great, thank you. What David touched, actually, it's another interesting and very important actual principle is adaptation. Constant adaptation. Chameleon changed the colors actually in a different time of need. So the same men of Tao, the more rigid we are, the more dangerous to come to us. So the adaptation, that's the actual, then the more humility we cultivate, then better we use art of adaptation. Actually, Greg, tell us about this a little bit. What do you think? Your thoughts?
Well,
about
one of the things that
adaptation?
occurred to me while you were speaking, it seems like the work of the Taoist man is we have to, on the one hand, constantly fight against the social programming that we're bombarded with. But while we're fighting against it, we also have to learn about it, understand it, so that we can adapt to the situation that we're in. It's a constant struggle to balance living within the society, but also knowing that the social programming in many ways is working to hurt us as an individual. And so we have to adapt to that constantly changing environment.
Mm-hmm. And it's a constant work. It's not like taking a shower once a month. It's every day. It's a work every day. Every day something, we have to change something inside ourselves. Adaptation. So that another thing, which we spoke before. Man of Tao, first of all, declare the war on himself. That's the whole thing. Because all our problems practically, 99%, sometimes one accidents, it's beyond our even limitations, but practically 99% of our problems, it's with us. That's what it is. It's not a good idea to blame anything, to blame society, the parents. No. The moment that's come back again to humility. You see, blaming someone, whatever, it's a pride. It's actually, we're really great attorneys to ourselves. We're unbelievable lawyers. You know, we always, when it comes to myself, I say, well, you know, that's my attorney come out and say, no, Alex, you know, you could do this and you could do that, you know, it's not really your fault, it's that fault and this. No. The man of Tao should understand that all our problems within myself. That's it. Declare war on myself. Again, most important on the pride. Because pride is everything. Whatever, because pride, why is that? Why is such a strong issue with the pride? Because social program of cultivating our pride. You have to be prideful of this, you have to be prideful of that. It's a social programmer create great barriers which we have to overcome. And they create a set of values and explain to us. Actually, in this set of values, you're the terrific man. You have to be prideful of your achievement. It's, whatever we achieve a lot of times, again, it's beyond what we deserve. Of course, what we deserve, good question, and beyond our hopes. So it's kind of interesting how even idea of adaptation, idea of need goes to the humility, which goes to everything and anything. Then we come back to another interesting thing. What teacher said, chaos, absurdity, suffering. Yeah, our life full of chaos, absurdity, suffering. the great teacher Lao Tzu. But again, what does it mean? Prideful man fighting with chaos, absurdity, and suffering. That's what it is. Prideful man who is so powerful because social programmer told him, you're the man, you're the king of the universe, you can do whatever. Fighting with the chaos and absurdity and the suffering and fighting because it makes difference. And the reality, chaos and absurdity is a part of our life. That's as natural as a rain. When rain is coming, I mean, you want to fight with the rain? No, put an umbrella again, and put a raincoat. The same chaos and absurdity. We can only look at it and say, it came naturally. That's what it is. Suffering, yeah, because suffering is a test. How we'll go through suffering. But the biggest thing, again, that's why I'm talking about humility. We have to accept it. Absurd and chaos as a normal thing, normality. Because our human limitations pushing us actually to make strange decisions and then pridefully fight with this decision. It's kind of interesting concept, how chaos, absurdity, suffering goes to natural way. Sam, I want you to open up a little bit this concept, please.
So when we're talking about chaos, absurdity, and suffering, if you're prideful and you're trying to fight with this, oftentimes you're trying to change the world or you're trying to change the society around you. You become involved in political movements in order to try to alter society according to whatever idealistic view of the world that you have. And just having an idealistic view of the world is somewhat prideful because you are taking the position of God, because you're basically saying, I know what's better for the rest of the world than anybody else does, and it should be this way.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah, very good, Sam. Great. It makes you a good Tao man.
Hey, had a good teacher.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we have to remind ourselves every day, every moment, that whatever we see some kind of chaotic behavior of people or tons of people in an absurdity of situation, we really shouldn't judge it hardly. Oh, it's absurd. We have to say, well, that's what it is. It's like snowstorm in the winter time, and it's like rain again, like I said. It's a normal thing. Suffering, well, what is suffering? Suffering is a test. How we're going through suffering without pride again. Adaptation, then we'll go through suffering a little bit better. If we're prideful people and say, well, we suffer, but we don't have to, oh, that's, why not? Look at the nature. Look at the poor animals who suffer all the time. They have a little break and that's it. There's no pride in antelope, which they see the jaguar or tiger run away as fast as possible. Little rabbit doesn't have big pride running from the wolf or fox. It's just so, whatever adaptation require, we constantly have to fight with set of values which society put on us. If you're prideful, you have to do this. But then it's a conflict with my interest, with my personal human interest. Should I do it? Shouldn't do it? So now I'll come back again a question, why I do this or why I do that. So it's about humility. Now we'll come back again to idea of the sick-minded actually. What is a sick-minded and how it goes to humility? Master Percoco, please.
There's a quote in the Tao Te Ching that says, if I'm sick-minded and I know that I'm sick-minded, then I'm not sick-minded. And what that means is it kind of goes to this idea of the limitations of human knowledge that we spoke about a bit earlier. If I know that I'm limited, that I don't understand everything, then I operate within that knowledge. So I operate with the things that I do understand. So if I know that I'm limited, then I operate with this limited capacity and I'm okay. But if I'm limited and I don't think that I'm limited, if I'm very prideful and I think that I understand everything, that there's nothing beyond my capabilities of understanding or my abilities, that's just not correct. I mean, that doesn't go with reality. So understanding the limitations of your knowledge and working within those limitations to adapt successfully to the structure, as Master Anatole was saying, that's really the goal. It is interesting in this time of social change. Do we change or do we adapt? It is interesting. The chameleon doesn't adapt nature to be the color of itself. The chameleon adapts the color of itself to match the background in nature. And we also can't change the environment around us. We're too weak. We're too limited. We don't understand the cause and effect, the consequences of our social actions that we take, the counter pressures that are involved with those actions. As a result, because of our weakness and our limitations of understanding, all we can do is adapt to the environment that we're in. As we spoke about before, the goldfish that's in the bowl doesn't seek to change the aquarium. It has no way to do that. It only adapts to the water inside.
Great, great. So now, this is, Rick, you touch very interesting thing. It's interference. So prideful person will say, well, I'm a powerful man. I'm a mighty human being. I can interfere. And that's the pride again. What do you think about this concept? Interference and pride. Sam?
Well, interference and pride, I mean, if you're interfering in someone else's path or someone else's life, once again, it comes down to pride, because you are essentially saying that you know better what's better for some other person or some other situation than anybody else. And once again, you're kind of taking the position of God and determining that you know what's best and that everybody else should follow your lead.
That's terrific, great. The thing is, again, what interference does for a prideful individual, a prideful group of people, that they kind of figure out consequences. Well, if we interfere here or there, we'll get certain result. But you see, the little mortals, we don't know what result could be. It's really interesting. If we look on the history, what happened. For instance, I'm very curious lately about history of World War I, World War II. So there was a politician, Chamberlain. After World War I, he actually just tried to keep peace. Because actually Europe went through the World War I, which is a really insane war. Nobody really understood what the war was about, why a million people got killed really. So and Chamberlain was so much careful with actually interference of normal situation. He let Nazi actually arrive. The Germany at that time after World War I, not supposed to have army at all, more than 100,000 people. They shouldn't have all this machinery, this and that. And little by little, they grabbed half of the Poland. Then, Chamberlain said, well, it's all right, we'll give them that. And we'll be fine. This is at peace. Then they grabbed basically the France. And after that, he said, well, probably it's a little bit too much, but maybe we'll solve the problems. Interesting, actually, interference without going to conflict create incredible chaos, which again, natural in that case, as a World War II. Millions of people died. And interesting that nobody will talk about the policy of Chamberlain. Actually, nobody criticized it. Nobody actually explained it. Why does it happen? Because his interference was just like that. And consequences, the great politician Chamberlain thought that the consequences will be fantastic. He'll keep the peace. Few months before the war, he came to London and said, I brought you peace. Yeah. It's interesting how interference could be with active, actually, situation when person activize the something, or passivity could be also passive, actually. It's no intervention. It's still, its interference could go to both ways. In an active interference of action or passive action. It's still an interference. But idea again, we come back to consequences. No matter what's happening, will be consequences. And unfortunately, limited human being very approximately can understand the consequence of the action. That's why non-interference, more cautious we are, more careful we are, that's safer adaptation.
So, Alex, may I just ask, the perils of interference is that we're too stupid to understand the ultimate consequences with our limited understanding of the universe in general. That we run into problems when we attempt to interfere because we don't know what it's going to entail down the road. Is that approximately correct?
Yeah, no, it's correct, Greg. Because our pride tells us, I'll do this move and will be this result. Or I'll move that move and that will be this result. And then I'll do this and I'll do that. It's like playing chess with yourself without opponent.
When you think about the concept of free will, not only do we have free will, the 7 other million people on this planet each have free will. And to try to predict the consequences of your actions and what their individual choices are going to be and how those dominoes are going to fall is impossible for a human being to do. I mean, you can't say, I will make this move and then these 20 people are going to make this choice. You don't really know. You don't know what their choices are ultimately going to be or what the consequences of their choice are going to be or your counter choices and so forth. And it just goes on into infinity.
So a humble man would acknowledge that and not interfere.
That's correct.
Yes.
To add a little bit to what Sam was saying, we've spoke before that when a mortal is born, he has a human path, a mortal path. And each person has a spiritual test in life. And if we're to interfere in someone's life or their path, we're basically interfering in the great ultimate test of that person. And who are we to affect the spiritual test of another individual? It's not our job. It's not our way. It's interference.
Conversely, coming back to Sam's point of 8 billion people with 8 billion free wills and being unable to predict it, being human beings, we're also very easily programmable. So you do have societies that program mass amounts of people, and they know how they're going to respond. You can take a look right now at what's going on with all the fear of the coronavirus. They're easily tweaking one side or the other, a certain fear, and they know how the people are going to respond. They're just pushing buttons because people are the herd. So they're easily programmed. It's not like you have 8 billion philosophers and individuals who are critically thinking about what's going on. You have people who just obey what the social structure tells them to think and to do.
There's another great passage in the Tao Te Ching written by the celestial sage Lao Tzu, and it's called The Wise Ones of Old. And I'd like to read that, and maybe we can discuss some of the points in that. It really touches on a lot of the major points of humility that Grandmaster Anatole has taught us about in the past. The wise ones of old had subtle wisdom and depth of understanding, so profound that they could not be understood. And because they could not be understood, perforce must they be so described. Cautious, like crossing a wintry stream. Irresolute, like one fearing danger all around. Grave, like one acting as guest. Self-effacing, like ice beginning to melt. Genuine, like a piece of undressed wood. Open-minded like a valley, and mixing freely like murky water. There's many analogies in here that deal with the character of humility for the great sage. And as we spoke about this with Grandmaster Anatole, it was interesting that the character of the sage, many times it's not what people or what the common man would expect. For instance, irresolute, like one fearing danger all around. If you're to look up in the dictionary irresolute, it basically means uncertain. It means insecure. So really, the sage, like looking both ways before you cross the street, is not certain of his environment. He's not sure of what's going on. He's very careful and cautious, like crossing a wintry stream. If you're not sure how thick the ice is when you cross the stream, you move at a very slow pace, and your senses are alert to try and hear any cracking or any symptom that the ice is going to give way. So the sage has this character of caution, of sensitivity, of this state of preparedness and readiness. He's not prideful. He's not sure of everything. He's not confident in his abilities or secure in his knowledge. He adapts himself adequately and reacts on a reaction.
That's true. And as an opposite, the vulgar man, that's what I'm using the translation from Louis Tang, the vulgar man, very confident about everything and anything. There's no doubts in the soul of the vulgar man. Vulgar man knows. Vulgar man believes in anything what he hears or he knows already. And what is a horrible thing, the vulgar man will die for these beliefs. Because the pride tell him, do you have certain beliefs? That's it. You die for these beliefs. And vulgar man said, absolutely, because that's what it is. Vulgar man has no doubts. Vulgar man knows all consequences of his or their actions. Vulgar man can predict the weather and predict what's going on and knows everything and anything. That's the vulgar man. Any action what vulgar man makes, there knows consequences. Because whatever actions in the head of the vulgar man will be exact consequences when the vulgar man planning. And that's what creating extra chaos and extra absurdity and extra suffering in the end. But men of Tao who follow the Tao should absolutely understand it and expect it. And expect it as a normality. Instead of screaming, it's not fair, it's not normal, this is really absurd. Tao man said, yeah, this is absurd. That's what it is. It is absurd, and that's a result of the consequences of forces, which we don't really know. If some kind of action brings to more suffering and more absurd, that's what's happening. That's absolutely norm. And when pride is really tells the vulgar man to do certain things, and actually only, it's like a horse with the blinders. Horse with the blinders go just this way, that's it. But not allowed to see what's left, what's right. Now we put those blinders, the structure put on us and tell us that's the way, this is it. Well, declaration war on yourself.
When you're talking about the vulgar man, that's, once again, it's another manifestation of pride. Because if you have pride, you believe that you already know everything, you're closed. You can't learn anything. In order to learn anything, you have to be humble. You actually have to understand, I don't know something, and then go to a teacher or find someone to teach you whatever it is you want to learn and say, I don't know, can you teach me?
The character of the sage in this parable says, open-minded like a valley. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Sam. When you're prideful and you already understand and you know the phenomenon, then you have a closed mind. It's very interesting, this brilliant analogy also that the holy sage Lao Tzu uses as a guest. And I spoke recently with Grandmaster Anatole as this, and this really helped to enhance my understanding of humility and our role here on this earth. When you think about that, acting as a guest, if the sage, the character of the sage acts as a guest, when a guest is in someone's home, they don't make the rules there. They don't say when it's time to eat. They don't really set the tone of what's going to happen there. They're a visitor. It's not their place. They're not responsible for the household and the home and the people there. They're allowed to be there. And it's the same analogy for us in this dimension on this earth. The great ultimate and the gods place us here. It's not our earth. We don't own this place. We're basically visitors here. We're guests. That's the idea. And as a guest in your home, on earth, you also have to tread very lightly and be very sensitive. Don't be obnoxious. Don't think that it's yours. Don't treat it like it's yours. You're a guest and a visitor here. And the great ultimate can pluck you from this place at any time. So this idea of the guest creates this aspect of humility, to be sensitive to your environment and surroundings and not be obnoxiously prideful, like you own it.
That's true. It's absolutely true. So now we're touching another great concept, if borrowing. Everything is borrowed. That's a kind of funny. People accumulate things. It's a temporary possession, I'll say. It is temporary possession. They're buying super houses or buying, making more money, whatever it is. And if you tell these people, do you have a time to use it? Oh, prideful man said, of course I will. When I'll be around 120 years old, then I accumulate so much wealth, then I'm going to use it. Or something like that. Or maybe don't even ask it, because the social program, accumulate. Question, can you use it? It's like, I always ask questions for the people, the money, my clients, my followers. I said, what you gonna do with all these things? What's the money for? You already have 3 houses, 20 cars, and etc., etc. What else? What's gonna happen? What money can buy? And they basically say, well, one after that I'll get another 3 cars and another 2 houses, then I'll relax. But first of all, they can't relax. So what money can buy? It's a great question. Actually, that's what humility. But money buy only one thing, free time. When a really rich person, someone who already can afford free time, in doing free time whatever desires, if it's possible, between limitations. It's like read books, basically have a glass of wine and look on a waterfall. That's what on the pictures of the Chinese sages, whatever. That's only one thing money really can do. Buy you free time. And an individual can do something what he enjoys to do. Otherwise, again, everything is borrowed. Our dwellings which we got, our cars, our antiques. That's why I love to look on antiques, some antique paintings, antique swords, old swords on my walls, because it's remind me, 400 years ago someone used it on a horse, and last 200 years Different people possess it and put on the different walls of their dwellings. So that's always remind me how temporary it is, how temporary my possession. I have this beautiful Netskis. Someone else had it. Yeah. Then my wife, my children will sell it because they don't really care about that, or paintings. That's it. This borrowing idea again takes a lot of it's a humble attitude. Humility should be everything is borrowed. We don't know how long we can use it, so it's a temporary possession. It's like loan the car. You never treat it like car which you bought. So you're not going to wash it 3 times a week. You're not going to look at this. It's a loaner car. That's it. But that attitude should be to everything and anything. As you can see, we're touching different aspects of life, different terminology. But phenomenon, that's what phenomenon of humility goes to practically every aspect of our life. Again, I repeat it many times myself. So there's not even one aspect of our life if we don't really being humble and think about it as a humility.
It's interesting. I had said to Pete a day or so ago that you can see this character of humility and the character of the sage constantly in nature. With the coronavirus, I've been home a lot. And as I was sitting outside, just, observing nature and looking around, I saw this small rabbit who's basically in my yard constantly, this small rabbit. And he only really moves 4 to 5 feet from this hole that he dug underneath the fence. And while it looks like that he is relaxing, kind of chewing the clover and looking around, he has one eye constantly roving and his observance is everywhere. If I were to make a noise or walk towards him 1 step, he's like a coiled spring, and in a heartbeat, he jumps under this hole in the fence. So, while it looks like he's relaxed and he's blending in with nature, he's tensely on this spring, ready to dive for this hole for self-preservation. So that sensitivity, that preparedness, that state of readiness, that is the character of the sage. And it can be seen in the rabbit, and as Grandmaster Anatole said, it can be seen in the largest predators. If you see the lions and tigers when they hunt, they crawl on their belly when they stalk something. They camouflage themselves in the surroundings, and they crawl inch by inch on their belly to get closer. And that aspect of humility is also present even within the largest predators and the smallest prey.
I'm reminded of the poem by Alfred Lord Tennyson. He mentions nature red in tooth and claw. It just basically touches on this idea that the world, contrary to a lot of beliefs, is not a kind and loving place. It's a vicious, perilous environment. And you have to constantly remind yourself that you're lucky to live one breath to the next. And that goes to humility as well. I have to constantly be on guard because I'm a frail, feeble creature, lucky to be here for as long as I have.
Absolutely.
Well, Rick, your rabbit living in your yard, it's a smart rabbit. It's a humble rabbit. It's a rabbit who probably knows, and something can happen, and this rabbit will live longer.
He's
other
not
rabbits,
little. He's good size, so he's a few years old probably.
All right, that's why he lives few years. Other rabbits I know, they just don't care. That they live in a safe environment of the suburbia. I've seen those rabbits. And they don't really care for a while what's happened. Those rabbits don't live as long as your humble rabbit. So the same goes to human beings. Some human beings cautious, careful, things can happen. Some of them, others, very confident that nothing's going to happen. Absolutely nothing. It's I spoke with a friend of mine, Michael, who is a plastic surgeon, and so we talk about the guns. He said, "Oh, guns! Oh my God, I want to have guns. Weapon? No, 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 no." I said, "Listen, what happened? If bad guys will come to you, break to your beautiful house, and will do terrible things to you, to your wife, to your daughter. What are you gonna do?" He kind of looked at me. He said, "Well, I hope it never happened." That was an answer.
Wishful thinking.
That's it. I hope it's never happened.
It definitely happens to some people.
Yeah, well, but that's an answer. I hope. Then I saw the actual little program on TV where narrator, it's again an interesting attitude about the guns. He walked to the students in some college, and all three of them, he asked them, "What do you think about guns?" So a young man, maybe 20, 21 years old, said, "Oh, I wouldn't feel safe even in my house would be a gun." Yeah, then he come to the girl and she said, "Well, this gun is terrible, this is the weapon." The third girl said practically the same. And then he asked, it's another the same question, what happened if you're under attack? If some kind of crazy, insane person, criminal break in your house? All three of them told him basically the same what my friend plastic surgeon. They said basically, "I hope it will never happen." And the girl said, "No, it just not happen." Actually, third girl said, "I'll call cops." That was very kind of rational thing.
I'd actually like to comment on that, because that's actually another aspect of pride, because a lot of people, they go through life and they think, nothing will ever happen to me, and they live their lives as though they're immortal and invulnerable. And then if something does happen to them, they're always along the lines of, why did this happen, or so forth. But they didn't have the humility to understand that something could happen, and perhaps to prepare against it. What did you do to prevent it from happening?
You're absolutely correct. That's right, Sam. We don't really know outcome of the actions. We don't know outcome of mob actions. We don't know outcome of our own actions. That's why we have to be so careful again. And to positively say, well, it's not gonna happen, or I hope it's not gonna happen. Well, it's not very rational even way of thinking.
I think the great analogy was yours, Grandmaster, years ago, before surgery, talking about percentages of things that happen and how often they happen. And in readying for surgery, they ask you to sign a release form that has the percentages of people that never return from general anesthesia. And while those percentages are like 0.002, and you're signing this form, the Grandmaster asked the anesthesiologist, what if I'm in this percentage? That's the problem. That's the issue. Well, it is a very small percentage. What if I'm in this percentage? What do I do then? And maybe home invasions happen on a very infrequent, schedule, but they do happen. And what if you're in this small percentage?
That's correct. I had few surgeries, and every surgery which I went, actually, I love to torture actually anesthesiologists with the same question. They say, well, sign it, I said, oh, I'll sign it. But by signing it, again, most people sign it with a great deep belief that nothing happened. When I go to surgery, I think, yeah, it can happen. That's why I prepare my paperwork, my will, whatever it is, even if it's some kind of innocent surgery, because you never know what's going to happen. You see, and yeah, everybody could be in the 0.002%. It can happen. Yes, it may be unlikely, likely, hopefully not. Hopefully, what is the word hope? You see, but that can happen. And
it happens to some people.
That's
happens to
correct. That's why
somebody.
we got 0.02%.
It's not zero.
That's why the martial artist, a genuine, humble martial artist, has the idea that his opponent, his enemy, is bigger, faster, and stronger. And that's why he has to train, because he has this humility that the person he could potentially be fighting is better than him, not weaker than him. So that puts him in the right mindset so that he has to try harder, he has to improve his technique, and he has to fight for his life. He can't walk into a battle or a fight or a conflict with the idea that he's going to kick this person's ass easily because he's so much smaller than me.
It's underconfidence instead of overconfidence.
Right. Well, I think we all, because of the way we're raised, we talked about where does pride come from. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we're raised in a particular environment where we say, well, I live in the best country, I live in the best town, that we're all proud of some aspect of what we live, which tends to make us think of ourselves as special. And the thing that just flashed into my head was, consider Las Vegas. Las Vegas is full of giant hotels, which cost billions of dollars. Where did that money come from? It all came from people who went to Las Vegas to gamble, and they were all sure that they were special and they were going to win. And most of them were wrong. And that's why there's the hotels.
Well, the social programming is kind of a very interesting phenomenon of pride. I was born and raised in Soviet Union. In 27 years, I lived in a terrific country which doesn't exist anymore, Soviet Union. And we lived in commune apartments. That's mean in 3 rooms lived the family. 5 people, 4 people. So in one 3-room apartment could be like a 21 person, 18 people lived with 1 bathroom and 1 kitchen. And we all knew that we live in a super country, with absolutely, which you have to be very proud of what government did for us, actually. How free we Soviet people are. It's iron curtains, nobody could even go anywhere. Basically, living in a kraal, in a Zulu kraal in South Africa, the same idea. Actually, no, these people live better because it's the great Zulu warriors. But the propaganda made people proud of this great country of Soviet Union. You see? And when actually the Iron Curtains was gone, and now they happy capitalist country for 30 years already, it's people who discuss it say, oh my God, we lived in a strange hole. We were humiliated actually with 5 people in 1 room for years and years. The food was terrible. This was terrible. The money they paid us didn't exist on the market. It was the called wooden ruble. It's like piece of paper which Soviet Union actually printed and give it to us, which could be used only inside. But the pride, they all say, you're so proud. You the Soviet citizens. You live in the best country in the world. This is it. And the millions of people did believe that. Without doubts. Few people had doubts. Well, they perished in concentration camps because they tried to express their doubts. If they would be a little bit more humble, they would keep it to themselves. But that's exactly what happened. You see, my life in Soviet Union was a great experience, actually, about humility, about the pride, about programming. It's kind of very interesting phenomenon. Which seduced millions of people being proud of their miserable existence. That's it. So it's like in Orwell, so some animals are actually more equal than others. So of course, even in the Soviet Union, so-called servants of the people, they lived in their own houses, the buildings, they had country houses, their children travel overseas, but there was a very, very small percentage and nobody really knew about that. So this group was a little bit more equal than others. But majority of people were very proud of that they live in the greatest country in the world. That's it. So we'll come back again to the pride, and this is ostentation ideas of special. Proud person become to be very special for themselves, and try to act without camouflage. And it's like a rabbit. One rabbit, like Richard has a smart rabbit, 2 years old rabbit, who actually reacted to anything. And we saw other rabbits who weren't cautious enough and didn't live long anyway, eaten by coyotes or whatever, or bad people. So, Mr. Wright, what do you want to add it?
No, actually, that covered it pretty well. That the pride, because it suffuses everything, it distorts your notion of what your place in the universe and how important you are. And we talked about bad things can happen to anyone, and yet if you're a proud person, it's going to be much more difficult for you to accept this because you have pride. You don't deserve this bad result that's happening. The first thing I thought of was a bunch of proud dinosaurs who didn't realize that a 6-mile long asteroid was about to hit the world and change things fairly dramatically for them.
Mm-hmm. I think Dave has brought up a very interesting point also that we spoke about previously with respect to humility, that from a religious aspect, a lot of times when we meditate, when we pray, we deal with the great ultimate and the Taoist gods and deities. And if we, in these interactions with the great spirits, we understand our limitations, we understand that we're a lower life form, our ability to communicate and understand even simple messages is very, very challenging for us. And yet, when we look at ourselves in relation to other mortals, most people think that they're pretty, they're very intelligent, they're very talented, but the perspective of humility has to come from this idea of dealing with the spirit world and understanding our place, that we're subservient to the great gods and deities as a lower life form. And this feeling of inadequacy, of shame, basically creates this aspect of humility.
It's true, that's true. And also it's another interesting aspect. When we're humble and uncertain, then we want to explore the world. Then we understand we don't know much, our limitation, we're so limited. And we want to expand our horizons. The proud person already knows everything. This is it. Proud person believes in a science. And also what science? Science is a knowledge of today. It's a microscopic knowledge of today. How anybody in the right mind believe in a science? There's a whole group of intellectuals who say, well, I believe only in science. What is our science? Science change. Good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, a million other things. It's changing all the time because it's science for today from our mortal things. But if person is humble, full of humility, you want slowly explore the knowledge, explore the world, explore all limitations, push them a little bit. It's like, again, our analogy with the weightlifting. You're not putting 20 pounds extra, you'll get hernia. You put half pound on each, a little bit by little, and then 5-6 months later, if you want to put more weight, you put another half pound. And that's how basically exploration goes. If I'm humble, I understand my knowledge limited, and I want to open little bit walls. I do it very little. So that's another actually great aspect of humility. But again, we can talk about that from morning to night because there's no such thing if it doesn't touch humble attitude and humility. It's just very important to talk about it, understand it again and again. Because we constantly have to discuss, sometimes we're talking about the same things. Yeah, Tao is a diamond. And the different angles of the diamond always touch each other. And it's a good idea. It's like a training, physical training. You don't train physically, you're losing muscle tone. You don't train mentally. It's nothing wrong to discuss the things again and again and again. It touches the same subject, maybe from different angles, or maybe the same. It's like a reminder to ourselves. Actual reminder again, our limitation. It's a humility.
I'd actually like to comment on one aspect of humility that, based on what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that pride actually makes you more vulnerable to manipulation. I don't know if any of you have read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, but one of the primary principles that he talks about in that is that when you wish to influence somebody, you wish to feed their pride and their sense of self-importance so that they are more inclined to do what you want to do. So pride actually makes you more vulnerable to manipulation of all sorts, both social and at a personal level. Whereas humility would give you a better picture of the world and what's really going on around you.
No, that's right, Sam. And then we come back again to things I just touched it. We're talking about the same thing. Anybody who wants to create the social mess, so-called, the person who want to interfere, that's a prideful person. All he should say or scream, it's not fair. That's the key. It's the key to mental social disorder. If you want to wake up, actually, millions of common men and create the social mess, you have to scream loudly, it's not fair. That's it. Yeah. And all these vulgar people immediately understand it, because nothing is fair, but in their prideful mind, something should be fair. And then they're becoming to be what? Instruments of few social bandits who actually programming them, who direct them, and finally abuse them. But to create the storm, the social storm, all have to be done is scream, it's not fair. That's it. This means some very smart person understands what is fair. And fair is a good Robin Hood idea. Take it from the rich, give it to the poor. Again, being in Soviet Union, I survived all these concepts, as you see. It came to total, actually, dismember of Soviet Union and a mess which is going on for years, and only now, with a happy capitalism, they're recuperating after almost 90 years of mess. So the idea of fairness, it's a really very interesting leverage, torque, when actual manipulators use all the time. Why? Because it's a match which burns pride.
Ironically, the story of Robin Hood was hijacked after a few centuries of him being around. The common people loved the stories of Robin Hood, but in the early days, he didn't steal from the rich and give to the poor. He just stole from the rich or anyone who crossed his path, and he had no qualms with just killing people indiscriminately. One of the first few ballads about Robin Hood, I think he killed 23 people with really little remorse. And then as people started to take his tales and kind of metamorphosize it for their own agenda, that's where this whole idea of stealing from the rich, giving to the poor, he was much more noble. Just like King Arthur, they took their original tales and they started to mutate those to fit the idea of the royalty. That's King Arthur goes to the royals, Robin Hood goes to the common people. But it's all used for their advantage. They manipulate the original stories of them.
Well, it's an idea, general idea. Take for someone who got plenty and share it with others who don't have anything. That's such a seductive idea for a simple-minded person, actually, who knows this is right. You see, pridefully knows. And when actually the distribution of wealth happened, the vulgar man still a vulgar man, abused even worse than before, because different gang grabbed the power. Yeah, but probably Probably we have to survive through these things, so learn something. But unfortunately, human beings don't learn much, no. It's all repetition and again and again. It's all repetition of chaos, suffering, and then proud people start to fight with chaos, and start to fight with absurdity. That's a mistake which men of Tao will never do. Men of Tao never involve in any social things, right or wrong, because men of Tao will never understand outcome, what's going to happen. And especially fighting with absurdity. No, you can't. We have to accept it, embrace it, camouflage it again, and adopt absurdity. Well, that's the very important concept of Taoism. Adopt absurdity. So that's the lesson of today. Adaptation of absurdity.